Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates.
Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of Hindu newspaper. Articles dated 27th of August 2021 are listed on your screen, and the timestamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin the first article for our today's discussion. First article for today's discussion was published on page 6 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. This article actually talks about the national monetization pipeline which was announced in 2021-22 budget of the union government. However, this article actually provides the critical analysis what should be done in order to promote the monetization of the assets which are lying idle. However, this article also talks about the importance of infrastructure financing. So, the context says that the recent push of the government to extensively utilize the national monetization pipeline has resurfaced the benefits and the criticism of the program. Now, the relevance of this article comes from the fact that we are talking about a government scheme and program which is UPSC's favorite for both prelims and the mains examination. When it comes to the General Studies Paper 3, the discussion will help you to write a good answer on the questions related to infrastructure, inclusive growth, export promotion, government financing, and of course the union budget, along with many other micro points. The content for this discussion will include what is national monetization pipeline, important terms of this article which we should know, challenges related to this monetization pipeline, challenges related to the overall infrastructure financing in the country, what government initiatives have been there in order to promote the infrastructure financing, and we will also look into the other possible way forwards. The relevance of infrastructure in the UPSC syllabus can come from these two questions. In General Studies Paper 3, UPSC has already asked questions related to the infrastructures of airport, the relevance of PPP model, and in fact in 2013 also they asked the question related to the PPP model for infrastructure development in the country, their pros and cons. Hence, a discussion becomes very important from the perspective of UPSC. So let us start with the first discussion. What is National Monetization Pipeline? Well, the objective for this scheme was to monetize government assets through limited private participation. Now, first of all, what is monetize? Monetize here means turning into money. So let's say government has 100 acres of land and it is lying idle. So why not provide this 100 acres of land to a private company which can utilize its land in order to produce something, let's say an agricultural crop, or they can set up a factory, or they can set up a manufacturing unit. They can also set up some godowns or maybe warehousing facilities. And in return, they can pay rent to the government on regular basis or maybe a lump sum amount. So what they are doing? They are turning asset into money benefits. Now the second point is, what is limited? Why not unlimited? Well, limited under National Monetization Pipeline means that there will be no transfer of ownership. That is, whatever assets will be put up for the monetization process will be given either for rent purposes or for lease. They will not be sold off. Hence, this difference is important for us to understand. The target of the government is to achieve the monetary benefits till financial year 2025. Now the question arises that why do we need to monetize government assets? The reason being that India's aggregate monetization potential is 6 lakh crore rupees, and this can help in national infrastructure pipeline also. So if government wants to expand the infrastructure development in the country, why not utilize its own asset in order to generate money? The second reason being that government is looking for strategic disinvestment policy, where they are looking for equal partnership with the private sector, the corporate sector, as well as the foreign players. And under this strategic disinvestment policy, central government will look into few identified areas in order to attract the private investment. And lastly, government is also looking for limited government presence. It simply means that government will focus more on the areas such as defense, law and order, security purposes, communication, and foreign relations. and leaving all other issues to the private sector, where economy of scale is far more important than the public welfare. The aims and the objective of this program was to transfer the revenue rights and not the ownership rights to the private player. As we have talked about the limited private participation, this means the same. It also has an objective to take advantage of idle government assets, especially in the sector of infrastructure, which includes your railways, roadways, and many other assets. It also talks about taking the value benefit of brownfield projects which are underutilized. Let's take an example. Let's say there is a public sector undertakings and this company has an area of 10 hectares. Out of this, only 5 hectares is being utilized for the production, storage, and other purposes. The rest 5 hectares of this company is lying idle. This project is a brownfield project, so why not utilize and provide monetary benefits to this leftover area? This also talks about monetizing the operating public infrastructure asset. Let's say the railway lines. It means why not provide private sector to run their, let's say, goods train or goods and services trains on the same railway track which is utilized by the public agencies. So government can take rent or maybe a lease out of those operations. The objective also says that road, railways and the power sector comprises over 66% of the total estimated value. So these three sectors alone can provide 66% of the funds when it comes to the monetization process. And lastly, the best aim and objective of this program is to support the national infrastructure pipeline, which is emphasizing to provide over 100 lakh crore rupees to develop the infrastructure sector, both social and the physical, in the country. When it comes to the important terms in the article, let us see them one by one. The first term was monetization, the second one was the modes of monetization, then we have greenfield projects and the brownfield projects. Well, monetization is nothing but transferring of the revenue rights to private parties for specific transaction period in returns for upfront money, or maybe a revenue share, or maybe a commitment of investment in the assets. This definition is actually related to the current national monetization pipeline and not the general economic term. Well, it simply means government will give a set of assets to the private player. They will give either money or maybe a revenue shares in the long term, that if a company is earning, let's say, 100 rupees as a profit, they will share 20 rupees with the government. Or they can also commit to provide investment in the future. So this is the kind of monetization this scheme is looking for. Now, the point comes that what mode of monetization we can utilize. The first one being real estate investment trust. The second one being infrastructure investment trust. These are nothing but more simplified versions of mutual funds, where people can invest in small amounts to the infrastructure development and can earn returns in the long term. When it comes to the PPP is also one of the important tools to provide monetization. But in this sector, we will not talk about build objective of a PPP model. That is, we will not talk about build, own, operate, transfer components of PPP model. Here, building is not part of the private agency. Private sector will not build any asset. They will just utilize the asset of the public sector or the government. This is the most important difference in monetization and privatization. Hence, government will use these three important components of PPP: operate, maintain and transfer, toll, operate, transfer, operation, maintenance and development. So there is no word related to building an infrastructure. This difference is important to understand. Now, the point is, what is greenfield project? Well, it simply means something new. Brownfield simply means the existing one. Greenfield project means new projects. That is investment in manufacturing, office or other physical company related structures which have no previous facility existing. Under brownfield, we have projects which are related to modification or upgradation. So we just modify and upgrade an existing project, let's say a railway project, let's say a highway project, or maybe the airport project. So if Indira Gandhi International Airport is getting a new runway, it is a greenfield project. If the same runway of Indira Gandhi International Airport is getting renovated, it is known as brownfield project. Now let us look into What are the challenges which national monetization pipeline is actually facing? Well, these are some of the challenges which we should know in order to understand the important hurdles faced by the financing of the infrastructure in the country is related. The first issue is sharing of risk and reward between public and the private sector. Let's say there is an asset which value 100 crore rupees. Now, if a private sector goes into the risk or they face losses, will these losses be borne by the public sector, or what will be the sharing of those risks? And if there is an excess profit, what will be the sharing of that profit? This is a major challenge when it comes to the contract between the both parties. The second issue is the low level of capacity utilization. The existing public sector undertakings and many other assets of the public sector is lying idle. And because of this low capacity utilization, there is a suggestions by many economists which say instead of bringing the private sector into the picture, government should focus on higher utilization of those resources. That is, the existing public sector undertakings must increase their efficiency in order to utilize whatever capacity they already have. We also have the issue of regulated tariffs. It means that number of assets which government is utilizing. Let's say there is a railway track between Delhi and Mumbai, and government wants the private sector to run their respective goods train. When they are running the goods train, they will be paying a particular set of tariffs. Now, when it comes to the payment of the tariffs, government have large budget allocation in order to bear the losses of those tariffs. What about the private sector? They are profit oriented and sometimes they do not have major resources to pay the price of those tariffs, and they will end up perishing in those high end tariffs. So government need to focus on this challenge also. Then we have the issue of balancing the profit and the utility motives. See, public sector is working to provide utilities. The best example being your COVID related vaccines. In these vaccines, the objective of the public sector is to provide utility, service to the citizen. On the other hand, the private sector will look for profits. And that is the reason why COVID vaccinations in the private hospitals are charged. On the other hand, in government hospitals, they are free. So government has to look into the objective of providing a balance between creating profits and the utilities together under national monetization pipeline. We also have the issue of low interest among investors. Most of the assets under this public sector are of poor quality. We have roads, we have railways, we have airports and whatnot. Those assets which are created by the public sector are not demanded by the investors. The best example here being your Air India, which is not finding a good investor under the foreign direct investment. We also have the issue of deflated and inflated valuation. Let's say government is trying to monetize its asset of 10 crore rupees of a plant. Plant here means a particular land for factory. But the private investor which has invested in this land is getting a valuation of, let's say, 5 crore rupees even after 10 years. So it is a loss. So who will bear this loss? Will government compensate this loss? So rise in the price or fall in the price, will it be evaluated? Will it be compensated? Remains a question to be answered. Then we have the issue of lack of identifiable revenue streams. See, there are sectors like roads which have regular sources of revenue. We have toll plazas where private party who are taking these assets for monetization can easily recover the cost from the toll. But what about those assets which are not very well established to generate revenues? Will the private sector get compensation on that? It is still a matter of concern. Then we have the challenge of multiple stakeholders, because public sector becomes the owner, private sector becomes the operator, and both have different work culture. One is looking for welfare, the other one is looking for profit, and this creates the issue of operational management and the risk of operational management, which needs to be looked into. We also have lack of checks and balances. Given the same rule, who will become the master of all? Who will actually provide the accountability? Who will look into the transparency matter? That remains to be answered. And lastly, under the national monetization pipeline, we have a slow pace of privatization. As we have seen the case of Government of India's privatization program since the economic policy of 1991, where government has really achieved its targets of privatization and the disinvestment policy. And going without a particular agency in order to promote the privatization and the monetization program, which was actually promised by the government in 2014, absence of these kind of agency will create further slowdown in the privatization process. And lesser the privatization in the country, lower will be the confidence of the investor in order to monetize the public sector assets. Given the discussion in place, let us look into the possible way forward. The central government can roll out a separate agency as they have promised in 2014 to look into the asset monetization of India. They can also create a distinction between what to monetize, what not to monetize. See, this distinction is important in order to generate a confidence among the investors. They also need to look into attractive asset valuation. See, better pricing of an asset will definitely increase the interest of the investors in the project. If the government say that they can pay X amount of money for next 10 years with a guarantee to the investor, or the investor can be provided benefit of confidence that their investment in a particular asset, let's say a road or a highway or an airport, will be met with a guaranteed returns, they will definitely look into better investment opportunities. Central government should now also look into the participation of the state governments in order to raise local funds. See, most of the private players, they have confidence in the state government more than the confidence they have in the central government. We have the example of Gujarat, where the local businessmen have shown greater interest in the policies of the state government rather than the policies of the central government. And if state government is brought into the confidence of the central government, they can definitely enhance the private sector participation for the asset monetization. This will give us money to create more robust national infrastructure pipeline, and of course it will ensure the cooperative federalism and higher revenue for the infrastructure growth. And lastly, the price of the asset, let's say road, railway or even the airport, should be linked to the inflation of the year. It means the private player should not get loss after going for the asset monetization in any of the project. Now, given this status of national monetization pipeline, it is clear that the best possible way forward is to attract the private player through conducive policy parameters. Given this status in mind, let us look into what are the existing issues faced by the infrastructure sector when it comes to the financing. See, if we go through reading into the issues of the infrastructure as a whole, it will take more than 4 or 5 classes. So we will focus ourselves mostly to the infrastructure issue of financing, which is also the responsibility of national monetization pipeline. So linking these topics, now we will look into the issues. The first one is the fiscal burden. Almost half of the total investment in the infrastructure sector is done by the government through the budget allocation. But government funds have competing demands. They have to allocate funds to the education, to the health, employment generation, and many other things. So this reduces the capacity of the government to provide funds for the infrastructure, hence comes the role of private sector. We have issue of asset liability mismatch of commercial banks. Indian commercial banks are going with an ability to extend long-term loan to the infrastructure. However, short-term lending is very limited. And this short-run inability to lend to the infrastructure project has led to the stagnant infrastructure growth of India. We have issue of subdued investment in the PPP projects. After the slowdown of 2018-19 to 20, we have seen that private sector investment is yet to revive in the backdrop of the subdued interest from potential stakeholders. Legacy issues, weak balance sheets of the public sector bank have further limited and reduced the participation from the existing infrastructure player. See, weak banking sector means weak economy. So when a bank goes through higher non-performing assets, what does it faces? It faces lower confidence among the investors, which ultimately hurts the infrastructure project. We also have issue of investment obligation of issuance, insurance and pension funds. Well, it simply means that insurance and the pension funds are constrained by their obligation to invest in substantial portion of the funds in government securities. So when an insurance company, let's say LIC, So they are investing funds in the government securities. So their funding capacity and ability to generate funds for the infrastructure automatically reduces. India also have an issue of less efficient bond market because the corporate bond market is still a long way to go in providing adequate financing to the infrastructure sector in India. And lack of corporate bond market has also reduced the confidence of the foreign players to come and build infrastructure in India. We also have inefficiency of the user charge. Let's say there are many rewards and mass campaigns against the toll plazas on the national highways. So if people are not willing to pay the user charges for the services which they are entitled to, infrastructure confidence is going to die out very soon. And lastly, we have issues of legal and procedure. It includes your issues related to the land acquisition, environmental clearances, uncertainty, which affect the risk appetite of an investor as well as the banks. Given all these issues, what we are going through is limited infrastructural financing. Hence comes the role of National Infrastructure Pipeline along with National Monetization Pipeline. You should have a better linkage between both these programs. When it comes to the step taken by the government, well, they have provided viability gap funding. Well, viability gap funding simply means, let's say a project cost 100 crores, but the private player has, let's say, 80 crores in hand with all the sources, let's say bank, capital market, foreign borrowings, everything else. Now, the rest 20% will be given by the government through different concessional schemes. Government has made a provision to financially support viability gap up to 20% of a project cost. We also have provisions related to the foreign direct investment as well as infrastructure development, where 100% FDI is allowed under the automatic route in some of the sectors such as mining, power and others. Further, FDI is also allowed through the approval route in some other sectors like civil aviation. India has created India Infrastructure Finance Company Limited, which is a wholly owned Government of India company that can provide long-term finance to the viable infrastructure projects. The similar duty is also met by the Infrastructure Debt Fund to provide long-term funding. Government has also reduced some of the bottlenecks. Let's take the demand of housing by the middle class. So we have Housing for All scheme. We have Smart Cities scheme, which will provide the low-level infrastructure needs. We have Uday scheme, which has boosted the power sector in the country. We now have Masala bonds to raise funds from the external sector. We have National Infrastructure and Investment Fund, which is acting as a fund of the fund. And lastly, we have National Infrastructure Pipeline, which has promised to provide over 100 lakh crore rupees to fund different sectors of the infrastructure. Apart from these points, government has brought Make in India scheme and Invest in India scheme to promote infrastructure and its funding. Government has also passed a bill related to the National Bank for financing infrastructure development. This is important because this will act like a NABARD for the infrastructure sector. Lastly, recently the Ministry of Railway has planned to monetize its assets on eastern and the western dedicated freight corridor. Now, what does that mean? It means that, let's say this is a particular railway line. So we all know that railway line and the railway stations have idle places. They have leftover extra places which can be utilized in order to create and let out assets for lease or rent. These can provide short-term to long-term regular income to the particular agency, in this case the railways. Now, after going through all these points, you will be in a position to list down the major government initiative for infrastructure financing as well as the issues which are faced by the government as well as the private sector for the infrastructural financing matter. Given all this discussion at place, now I will leave you with the important mains question to practice given the discussions which we have conducted. Now let us move to the second article for the day. So the second article for today's discussion was published on page 1st of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. And this talks about the recent statement which was made by the Supreme Court in order to provide the relief for those children who became orphan when their parents died due to COVID-19 disease. Supreme Court has asked the central government that if it can provide immediate release of money from PM CARES Fund for the education of the children who have been orphaned or lost their legal guardian or either of their parents during the pandemic of COVID 19. Under this, the Supreme Court has cited Article 21A of the Indian Constitution, which has provided a right to education to every child between the age of 16 to 14. Citing this example, Supreme Court has asked but not ordered the central government to take out the funds from PM CARES, which was created in 2020 March, in order to provide relief material to everything which was related to the fight against COVID-19. Hence, this statement by the Supreme Court has become imperative for the central government, which is responsible to provide the welfaristic approach to the democratic framework. As this fund was created solely for the COVID 19 crisis, it has become important to discuss what this fund or what PM CARES is all about and how this fund is different from the other similar fund known by the name Prime Minister National Relief Fund. So let us start with the basic differences between these two funds. Prime Minister's National Relief Fund and Prime Minister CARES Fund. CARES stands for Citizen Assistance and Relief in the Emergency Situation Fund. Emergency situation as of now is considered to be the COVID-19 crisis. However, in future this can be extended to any other purpose. National Relief Fund was created in 1948 to help those people who were displaced during the partition of India and Pakistan. On the other hand, PM CARES was created recently in March 2020 in order to help people who were affected due to COVID-19 pandemic. Both these funds were created by the order of the Prime Minister, the first one under Jawaharlal Nehru and the second one under Sri Narendra Modi. The chairmanship of both the funds comes under the Prime Minister of India, so it is definitely under the executive control and not under the legislative control of the Parliament. The second most important thing is both these funds are working under the Union government. When it comes to the National Relief Fund, the other members include Tata Trust, representatives of FICCI, which is also a pressure group, and the Congress President. On the other hand, the PM CARE Fund has more representation from the government itself, where Prime Minister can nominate 3 members, which include your Defense Minister, Home Minister, and the Finance Minister. All these 3 members, along with the Prime Minister, are part of your cabinet. Hence, PM CARES comes more under the control of cabinet orders. The minimum amount to be donated under National Relief Fund is 100, but it is 10 rupees under PM CARES, and that is the reason why this fund is also known as micro fund. National Relief Fund actually provides an attachment to the private as well as state-run and central-run hospitals. On the other hand, there is no clarity on the networks with the hospitals under the PM CARE Fund. We also have another difference which says that PM National Relief Fund also focuses on national disasters, which may include earthquakes, tsunamis, and even the floods. It can also be utilized for providing assistance to the acid attack victims, cancer treatments, as well as the kidney transplantation. And it also can be extended to many other diseases. On the other hand, PM CARES was created exclusively for COVID-19 purpose. However, there is no limitation on this fund. In future, this fund can be extended to n number of other measures. Now, the reason comes that why government brought a new fund? Was this necessary? If they already had National Relief Fund, what was the requirement of a new fund? The answer comes to the simple conclusion that National Relief Fund was already burdened with n number of activities. As you can see, they also provide relief for physical as well as natural disasters. And this brings us to a conclusion that if the same fund would have expanded to the COVID-19 crisis, there could have been limitations as far as release of funds is concerned. And keeping this objective in mind, government created an altogether new funds for a sole objective. National Relief Fund can accept only voluntarily donations by institutions as well as the individuals. On the other hand, the contribution of PM CARES can also come from the public sector undertakings. In this, we have the best examples such as Indian Oil Corporations. We also have examples from State Bank of India and many other PSUs which provided funds for the fight against the COVID. This also can include the contribution from individuals, institutions, and organizations. But both these funds are not supposed to get any budgetary supports. And because of this reason, as they are not getting any fund from the parliamentary approval, they are not subjected to the scrutiny made under the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Given these differences, let us now go through what are the basic similarities between both these funds. Both these funds does not require any approval from the parliament. They are under the executive orders. Contribution to these funds are exempted from the income tax. They cannot be utilized without the direction of the Prime Minister, hence total control of the cabinet. Donations which are coming from the companies under the Companies Act 2013 are also eligible for corporate social responsibility. They do not go for the budgetary support as we have discussed. Both these funds were set up as trust, not as a company. They are exempted from the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Hence, foreign contribution can come without any limitations. And lastly, both these funds are not at all audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India because they do not meet the criteria of auditing as per the CAG guidelines. So given this discussion, now we are in a position to identify that government can easily release funds for the betterment of those children and their education who have lost their parents or the guardians due to the COVID-19 crisis. This fund can be released for their education to the schools authorities or the respective district administration, which can provide on-time delivery of education services to these children along with all the study material and basic income to sustain their education. Given this discussion at place, let us now move to the question attached to this article. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the third article for the day. Third article for today's discussion was published on page 4 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about the importance of ecosystem restoration at Sambar Lake, which is going through the issue of illegal encroachment and ecosystem deterioration. Given these two important issues, experts have suggested that there is a requirement to go for upgradation and intensive ecological restoration in and around the Sambar Lake. The context of the article says that shrinking of the Sambar Lake regularly has jeopardizing the flora and fauna of this place and also the brackish ecosystem. As we all know, Sambar Lake is a brackish lake which is found in the central part of Rajasthan. When it comes to the relevance of this article, from prelims perspective, it is important from the view of places in news and also as an important ecological site. From mains perspective, it can help us to write good points on ecosystem restoration as examples as well as a case study and can also help us in writing points on conservation of brackish lakes and ecosystems. The content for this article would be map of Sambar Lake, that is its location and places around it. We will also discuss about why Sambar Lake is important from the perspective of ecology as well as geography. We will also look into some of the challenges faced by this lake and what are the efforts which have been taken in order to restore the natural ecosystem of this lake. So let us start with the location first. As you can see, this is the zoom in map of Rajasthan where we can easily locate the capital city Jaipur, and on the western side of Jaipur we have the Sambar Lake. This is a brackish lake, saltwater lake, which is found in the central part of Aravalli. The area is surrounded by small hills and is known for storing the water in its salty form. The small areas around the lake is known for cultivation and production of salt. This lake is also known for harboring number of small and other bird species including the migratory one. So after the map itself, now let us look into why Sambar Lake is important. Well, Sambar Lake is India's largest yet inland salt water body. It is not the largest salt water body. Now, it is for you to decide which is the largest salt water body or lake in India. So if you know the answer, please comment in the comment box. This lake is also designated as a Ramsar site. As you can see in this map, we have Sambar Lake as one of the Ramsar site in India. Apart from this, Keoladeo National Park is also part of a Ramsar site from the same state of Rajasthan. The lake is situated in a depression which is part of your Aravalli range. This lake is known for the habitation for migratory bird, especially during the winter seasons. The famous migratory bird that visit this place is flamingo and pelican. Well, this image is actually taken from the Sambar lake itself. They come at this place during the season of winter because of the suitable environment and temperature which they are very habitable to. And because of this reason, the lake has become an important destination for migratory birds. The salt which is found in this lake is valued around $300 million, which is surviving the economy of the area and three other districts of Rajasthan, which includes your Ajmer, Nagaur, and the Jaipur district. This lake is also part of tourist desert circuit, which is ultimately part of the Swadesh Darshan scheme of the central government. Hence, it is also a very important tourist destination. This lake actually receives water from different channels or the drainage patterns, which include rivers like Samaud, Khari, Mantha, Khandela, Medta, and Rupangad. The threats which are responsible for the degradation of this lake are as follows. The first one being the spread of avian botulism. Well, this bacteria actually spread in and around the lake in 2019, which led to the death of hundreds and thousands of birds. This lake is also under threat because of the illegal mining of not only the salts, because illegal salt pans are taking down the encroachments in and around the lakes, but are also responsible for the other mining purposes, including your stones for construction purposes. The lake is also getting the issue of construction of residential colonies, and these colonies are responsible for blocking the natural flow of water which flows into the lake from the rivers which we have discussed above. And because of this hindrance, the lake is getting dried and dried year by year and losing down its actual geographical extent. Given this importance and threat, Government of Rajasthan has taken the following initiative in order to restore the natural habitat of the lake and also provide a natural ecosystem to the migratory birds. The first one being the development of new tourist point. Why these tourist points are being developed? The answer is to provide economic support. Because when economic support is provided to the people who are living in and around the Sambar lake through the tourist economy, they will not be dependent on the illegal activities which they are as of now practicing. Secondly, it will also promote the revenue earning to the state government. Government is also looking to start salt trains, which can transport salt from the lake itself to the other parts or the factory to the other refineries which are situated far away. And because of this, government can help in removing all those refineries which are trying to capture the actual flow of the lake. Once these refineries are shifted to the other areas, the lake can get back its natural ecosystem and the water storage area. Government is also looking to provide for new destinations including salt museum, caravan park, bicycle track and gardens in order to restore the plantation, reforestation and of course the tourism. Government is also providing the constant monitoring system for the protection of the migratory birds, because when unfortunate incident took place in 2019, government provided funds as well as scientific investigation to reduce the death of the migratory birds. And lastly, government is also looking to provide for solution to illegal salt production, which they have stopped using both legal as well as persuasive methods. So, after discussing this relevance of the Sambar Lake and what steps have been taken, you can utilize these points as a case study in your GS paper 3 questions. You can also quote this as an example for your GS paper 3, and you can also utilize these points in order to write an essay on ecosystem restoration. With this discussion at place, let us look into the question which is attached to this article. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the last article for the day. Fourth and the last article for today's discussion was published on page 7 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. This article actually talks about an important environmental concern, which is the death of predatory species of vulture. The article titled as the Clean Up Crew, and clean up crew here means nothing but the group of vultures which can act as a game-changing force to the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and of course the ecosystem restoration in India. Well, according to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, population of vulture came down from 40 million to just 19 to 20,000 in last 3 decades, which is a grave concern. And given this crisis, it also becomes an important for the relevance of UPSC. When it comes to the prelims, it is part of important flora and fauna in the news. And when it comes to the mains examination, it is important for your geography as well as your environment in GS paper 1 and 3. The content for today's discussion would be characteristics of vultures, vultures of India, threat to the Indian vulture, what measures have been taken by now, and the action plan to protect the vultures. Well, UPSC itself has asked questions related to the vultures in 2012, where they have asked questions related to the declining population of vulture and literally asked the cause behind it. So let us now start with the characteristics of vulture. Well, they are relatively social birds and they have an average lifespan of up to 30 years in the wild. They are bulky in physical features and they have nest at tall trees and the rocky cliffs. And that is one of the reasons why we find vultures in the states like Rajasthan, which have rocky cliffs. We have states like Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, again known for hilly areas and dense forest. And the reason why they are not found mostly in the states like Uttar Pradesh is lack of tall trees and the rocky cliffs. Well, vultures are slow breeders, hence they do not have large number of families. Given their excellent vision ability, they can detect the presence of dead animals from the great distances. And that is the reason why vultures are known to feed over a large span of area. Well, generally vultures do not hunt. They rely on the open carcasses of the dead animals. They have very high acidity which can help them to digest the rotten carcasses. See, every animal, every bird cannot eat the rotten carcasses of the dead animals. And this is the reason why we cannot rely on all other animals to clear up those dead animals and their carcasses. And hence, it is important for us to protect important vulture species. Because of the weak legs and calves, they cannot carry food with them, or like the birds of kites and eagles. Hence, they cannot feed their young ones at distant places. And because of this limitation, vultures are becoming vulnerable to those animals which already have presence of deadly chemicals in their body. When it comes to the vultures in India, well, India have 9 different species of vultures. But we need not to remember the names of all these vultures. We only need to focus on critically endangered. Well, these are 3 in numbers. The first one being the white-backed vulture, the second one being slender-billed vulture, and the last one being red-headed vulture. These 3 are under critically endangered list of your IUCN, hence require special attention. And UPSC also focus on those species which are either endangered or critically endangered, especially with respect to the prelim examination. When it comes to the important threat to the vulture, the first and the foremost, which was also asked by the UPSC in the prelim examination, is the use of a drug known as diclofenac. Well, diclofenac is used for animals to relieve the pain, but when this drug is consumed by the vultures, it causes their kidney failure and ultimately death. And this was the important reason for the phasing out of this drug. Hunting and trading of the vultures and their young one is also one of the reasons for the decline in the population. Habitation destruction, importantly being the forest areas, especially the high trees, are also reducing their habitation. And lastly being the electroculation, especially during the night period. All these reasons have reduced the vultures population to a considerable level, and because of that we have the following consequences. This includes your inefficient clearing of the carcasses and the contamination of the water system, because once dead animals are not cleared on time because vultures are not there to clear them, these dead animal becomes a reason for disease causing pathogens which may even enter the food and the water chain, causing illness to the humans. And lastly, it is also leading to the increase in the feral dog population, which is not good for the ecosystem balance, especially in the rural areas. Given all these issues, what government has done by now? Government has banned the diclofenac for veterinary purposes. It is available for the human consumption. They have also set up vulture restaurants where vulture can come and can feed on the diclofenac free carcasses. The best example is found in the states of Himachal Pradesh and also in the state of Haryana. Government has also included wide-backed, long-billed and slender-billed vultures and upgraded their category from Schedule 4 to Schedule 1, which provide the highest level of protection to the wildlife. We also have vulture safe zones, vulture conservation breeding centers where young vultures are breeded and they are released into the wild. We also have mass awareness and education program in order to make people sensitive about the cause and prevention of vultures. Ministry of Environment and Forest has also constituted the National Vulture Recovery Committee to oversee and to guide vulture conservation and recovery efforts. Well, this committee will provide all the possible suggestions in order to prevent this endangered species. Apart from this, government has also started a new action plan for vulture conservation for the period of 5 years between 2020 to 2025. This was launched by the Ministry of Environment and Forest with the following objective, which include prevention of poisoning of the cattle carcasses. Sometimes what happens, in order to decompose the dead bodies of a particular animal, humans utilize poisonous chemicals which ultimately lead to the poisoning of vultures and their death. So they have to be reduced. This plan also focuses on encouraging the conservation breeding programs, including providing the financial and the technical helps to the state government in order to run those programs. They are also looking for regular monitoring of the vulture population across the country because data help in better programming and planning. And they're also enhancing the vulture safe zone networks that will provide a interlinking of the different agencies, different stakeholders in order to create better implementing policies. With this discussion at place, now we come to the end of today's discussion on Daily News Simplified. I will leave you with the question of the day. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box.